Today's webinar is called Secrets of Visual Design on Windows 11. Now, there's a lot to get through, and I'm also going to do some demos as well. The talk should take around about 45 minutes, but because it's live, you never know, or maybe less or more. If you ask questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the questions later on, because I can't drive the presentation and also answer the questions like I do normally. Normally when it's pre-recorded, then I do it. Okay, so if you want to get hold of me, email me at ian.barker@gmail.com. And if you use Twitter, follow me on Twitter at @punctuation, whilst it's still there and isn't destroyed by Elon Musk. And if you want to find me on the web, go to about.me/Ian Barker. All my links are there for blogs and websites and things like that. What we're going to talk about? Well, Windows 11 is a, what's the word I'm looking for? An evolving or completely under development platform. It's fully live at the moment. And really, Windows 11 is multiple versions of Windows 11. I'm sure you all know this. If you have not adopted Windows 11 yet, it's only a question of time before you do, unless you move away from Windows and start using a Mac or something like that. As we all know, there were some requirements in Windows 11 that made it not quite the mass adoption that it otherwise would have been, to do with the Trusted Platform Module, or TPM module. That stopped a lot of older computers from being able to upgrade to Windows 11. That said, those kind of that hardware is gradually becoming more and more obsolete. Because of Moore's law, every 18 months the hardware halves in price and doubles in power, and that's very true. It still is true to this day. And with the advent of things like ARM, because Microsoft have even brought out their own ARM hardware, it's inevitable that at some point you are going to end up with Windows 11 if you continue to use Windows. Windows 10 already, the earlier versions of Windows 10 are now obsolete and end of life, as Microsoft call them. So, they're gradually going to ease the older versions of Windows out the door. RAD Studio with Delphi, which is what we're talking about today, mainly Delphi stuff, although a lot of what I'm going to talk about applies to C++ Builder as well. And the runtime library for both those got a lot of Windows 11 features built in. And particularly the VCL is very close to the metal. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But even so, even with the cool things that RAD Studio can do, there's some really good additional resources we can use too. Some of them I've talked about before, and some of them I haven't talked about before, so we'll cross those when we get to it. So I did a little presentation a while ago, and there's a blog post on blogs.embarcadero.com about this, called Adding the Wow Factor to Your Apps. And the weirdest thing is that nearly all platforms, whether it's mobile or desktop, the apps that seem to have the most attention given to their UI and trying out new features and new functionality and things like the Fluent UI interfaces, weirdly enough, they always seem to be the calculator and the weather apps. And it's a mystery to me why they are the ones, but I think I kind of understand why. And the reasoning is that if you think of a weather app, what a weather app really is it's a dashboard app. It's gathering together a lot of information like temperatures and sunset, sunrise, pollution, allergies and pollen counts and things like that. Lots of quite diverse information and needing to display it in a way that's easily consumable at a glance. And so I kind of understand why the weather apps are the sort of leaders in that kind of functionality, but it's still a little bit weird, isn't it? The calculator app, that's the Windows 11 calculator app on the right there. That really embodies a lot of the UWP standards that were, and the new Fluent UI and UI3 kind of methodologies and design ideas, shall we say, design language. It's not that exciting. It's a calculator, and we've gone away from this skeuomorphic design where calculators and notepad apps looked like imitations of the real objects, and they become more abstract. So the calculator app does still look like a calculator, but it's not made to look like a real calculator. It's just the idea of how the calculator will work. I'm being asked, can I provide the link to the slides again? There will be at the end. Don't worry, you'll see slides with them, links with them on. And there's a lot of links coming up at the end. So don't worry, I'll make sure there's there. And there will be a blog post on blogs.embarcadero.com as well that follows this up. So don't worry, you'll get the slides. So the secret wow factor, it carries across from desktop to mobile, these weather apps and the cool things they can do. If you look at that particular version, that's an iOS version, and what you're seeing there is the concept of movement, depth, and a kind of beauty to the apps. There's lots of graduation, lots of nice fonts on there. Sans serif rules the roost now. You don't have serif fonts with the little twiddly bits on unless it's some kind of massive title or something like that. But it doesn't matter whether it's desktop or mobile. They both seem to be the apps that attract the most kind of technology, shall we say, for graphics. And what can we do with Delphi? Well, we can emulate that with Delphi quite easily. This is an app that I wrote, which is actually an FMX app, a FireMonkey FMX app. And it just does a little bit of an animation there and some sliding in and out. And the only things we're using there, as I'll show you later, are Skier for Delphi with the animations, and then just the FireMonkey properties and methods to make those animations realistic and move around. But that's an idea of what you can do with just basic FireMonkey stuff. So visual design on Windows 11. Should I use the VCL or should I use FireMonkey? That's the big question. And the answer is it depends. Okay. If you're looking at an application that is absolutely going to be only Windows forever, and you're never really looking at least an app that's unmodified to do anything other than be on a Windows device, then the VCL is absolutely the most authentic, close to the metal Windows experience. Okay, if you're going to make it super pretty and do things like Fluent UI and the nice backgrounds where you have the acrylic, the frosted acrylic, frosted glass effect, then you may need some extra libraries, and I'll talk about those in a moment and show you some apps with it in. Likewise, if you want some pretty gauges and controls and things like that, you're probably going to need some extra components to add to make that worthwhile. Okay, or make it the best it can look visually. Lots of things in the VCL you can do. If you instead are looking for pretty and cross-platform, so the same app is going to work on Windows, and it is then going to work on Mac OS, and it's going to work on Linux as a graphic app, GUI app on Linux. And if you really needed to, go to mobile as well, although I wouldn't say that you'd have a desktop app working as a mobile, then FireMonkey is the route to go to. The advantage to FireMonkey is it's got an awful lot of controls to add that extra wow factor, that pretty factor to your apps built in right from the start. The disadvantage is it does work differently to the VCL. If you're a VCL programmer, if that's what you do, you write VCL apps, then there is a bit of a learning curve to understand that things like left and right and width and height are not the same in FireMonkey. Instead, they are position .x and position.y. Same with caption becomes text and a few other things as well. So there are differences. Doug Filto, sorry, I hope I'm saying your name right, Filto, he says MVVM allows us to leverage both FMX and VCL by isolating the UI from the data retrieval and processing. Not in the same app, you're not. If you're running a VCL app and you're including FireMonkey in there, They are the two. There are ways of making FireMonkey forms appear in VCL apps, and VCL forms appear in FireMonkey apps, but the entire back-end engine is completely different. So if you're using MVVM, then you're probably, by the sound of it, showing completely different modules, or using a DLL or something like that to fake that, because you can't have FMX and VCL in the same app easily. It's not the standard. But yeah, I totally get it. I get where you're coming from. MVVM is interesting. Let me just answer that question and say I'm going to say cool for that. Right. Next slide. So, excuse me. Let me take a drink for a second. Built-in RAD Studio features. Well, most of these you've probably heard about already, but if you haven't, and if this is news to you, good. The main thing with later versions of RAD Studio, and I'm not sure what version it came out with, it might have been 10.3 or earlier, but it could be 10.4, I think, per monitor V2, which is high DPI scaling. Now, per monitor V2 is very important now. And in fact, I would go so far as to say now, with nearly everybody running very large screens, in the last 18 months, it's become extremely common for people to have very wide monitors and stuff like that with high DPI. The high DPI tends to be 2K or 4K resolution. And a lot of people with 4K screens, unless they've got exceptionally good eyesight, will also have font scaling turned on. So they might have 125% font scaling, which we'll show you when we talk about later. But that will affect how your apps render. Older versions of Delphi are not going to handle that particularly well. They do work, but not so great. Later versions of Delphi, and particularly 11.x, I suppose, 11.1 upwards and 2 upwards, they render the fonts and render the controls crystal clear, and that's what per monitor V2 scanning does. It's very important for you. And the per monitor literally means that if you drag your app from one monitor, say your left-hand monitor, your right-hand monitor, and they have different font scaling, your app will render differently on the two screens, and they will look good on both screens. That's the theory anyway. There is a little bit of work you have to do sometimes, and it's still a bit of a work in progress, because actually, you know, what goes on in Windows and the graphics drivers varies as well. It's still very much a case of if you've got the right graphics driver and you've got the right monitors, then everything works fine. And if there's a problem, then you also know it, because it's obvious. The other thing, it's not really a graphic UI thing, but enable runtime themes, and we're going to talk about those in a moment, and make sure that your execution level, and these are both on the manifest of your project, is the lowest execution level you want. And if we say, and I don't know if this is news to people, but if we say as invoker, that means that whatever calls your app, whatever permissions they had, whatever user rights they had, your app will inherit those. If instead you say highest available, then it will take the highest possible rights. So they may have some kind of local administrator rights instead of the regular user rights. So if your app is launched by another app, it will ignore the previous app's rights and take the highest available rights of the user. And requires administrator means that, as you're all aware, when you go to run an application that is requiring administrator rights, up comes that little screen from Windows that will ask you to whether you're going to allow it or not, which sometimes confuses people because they don't see the little flashing icon down on the Windows taskbar. Suzanne has got a question about, or more of a comment about per monitor V2. I'll come back to that in a moment, Suzanne, and talk a little bit more about that in a second. She's saying she had problems with per monitor V2. Yeah. MDI is an issue with per monitor V2. Other built-in RAD Studio features, well, go to Get It Packet Manager. And if you've not been paying attention to the emails and not been paying attention to the social media, shame on you. You will have missed the fact that some new styles have come out. And there are actually very specific styles for Windows 11. They are tuned to Windows 11 and they are designed to make it fit in. And I'm going to show us using one of those on one of them, my demo apps at the moment. But they look great. They're really pretty. Go to Tools and then Get It Packet Manager. Down on the left-hand side where it says Categories, click on Styles, and then you can scroll down and see all the Windows 11 and Windows 10 versions. The Windows 11 versions are the ones that you see there: Polar Dark, Polar Light, Mine Shaft, and White Smoke, which are pretty good-looking styles. If you add them to your latest apps and you haven't used them before, I can tell you it's a real bump to the visual look and feel of the apps. It's great. Jim did an article about it, Jim McKeith, where he talked about the new look and feel of these premium styles. These are the VCL versions that he's showing here. There are FireMonkey versions as well. So if you go in and you look for FireMonkey premium styles, there are some great ones in there. The different ones are things like Polar Dark and Polar Light, which are the two on the left, I think. And there's one called Nero, I think, or something like that, which is very dark. I don't know where the names come from, but someone thought that up. And there's one called something like Smoke or something like that. But go to blogs.embarcadero.com/new premium VCL styles fall 2022, or just go to the main blog site and scroll around. I think it's one of the features articles at the moment. So those are kind of the things that we can do out of the box in the VCL and the FireMonkey controls. That said, there are a lot of other things you can do. There's a lot of Windows controls that will adopt the new look and feel, and when we apply the styles, the standard controls, as long as you've got the styling set up correctly, will absorb those new beautiful looking styles. Later on, we're going to talk about swapping styles at runtime, amongst other things as well. Nero apparently is Italian for black. I see. I thought it was some kind of Roman reference, like Emperor Nero. I thought it was going to be something like that, but Doug says no, it's Nero. The reason they call it Nero is it's just a black thing. Well, there you go. I'm obviously my Italian is failing me. So if we look beyond what we can do with the VCL stuff, then let's look at some other third-party controls. I cannot recommend this product enough. It is brilliant, and that is the thing called the Style Controls from Almedia Dev. Is a great little company, independent developer. Just need a drink for a second because I am losing my voice. These controls are incredibly cost effective. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe they're under $100 US for the controls, but the amount of controls in there are astounding. I'm going to show you a couple of demos with them later of all the different things you can do. We'll only scratch the surface. I could do an entire webinar on these controls. There's so many of them. I have no link to Almedia Dev at all. In fact, that's true of any of the stuff that I recommend. Nobody pays me to say they're good or bad. And if I think they're bad, then I just don't talk about it. It's as simple as that. But if I think they're good, well, why not? Why not talk about it? We're all programmers together. I get up every day and I write Delphi code every single day of my life. So Almedia Dev, what do? Well, they add the Fluent UI look and feel. And if you've seen my webinar before about the Fluent UI, you should know a little bit more about that. Someone's asking if enabling Runtime Themes, does it inherit the transparent theme from Windows? It's caused issues in my custom title bar comp. I'm not quite sure what you mean by transparent theme. I think the answer is yes. Some of the controls will go transparent. But what I'm going to do is I'll talk about that as well, because there's things you can do to stop that happening. You can turn off parts of theming and say you only want certain parts of the control to be themed, and that will stop it inheriting the transparency. If you look at this Our Media Dev screen that I have up here, you can see in the top of the screen there's a thing that says Fluent UI acrylic background. That's that cool kind of frosted glass effect that you see, where you can see the background of the desktop through there. Not all apps are going to be able to have that. It's not going to be worthwhile to them to have that, but these controls, the Our Media Dev controls, do it very, very well. And again, I'm going to show you a demo app with that in a moment that shows it. It supports virtually every single effect you could ever imagine that comes with the Fluent UI. So if Fluent UI is the way you want to go, then this is the way to go. With a style applied, can you override encode, i.e. on-cell draw for T-string grid? Yes, you can, but you have to do some code to pick colors correctly. So if in your on-cell draw, and I'm just going to say, I'm just answering that now. That's a question. If you try to do some on-cell drawing with themes enabled, colors are controlled by the theme. So if you try to do something like use CL background, if you're familiar with that as a color name, or CL highlight, if you change the theme, then the color that gets drawn will be the theme color, as long as you do it correctly. And in fact, I probably should do a blog article about that, because it's a bit of a subject that we can't, it's too long to go into right now. But you need to use the Style Manager to give you the actual correct color for the background, or for the border control, or for the highlight color, or the text color. Otherwise, when you change your theme at runtime and go to do an on-cell draw and draw the text color, it's going to look wrong. So if you pick a theme where the text is a dark theme, for example, and the text color is white, when you go in the on-cell draw of a T-string grid and try and draw some text thinking it's going to be black or white, it could be wrong. It's not a very good explanation. It's probably easier to show in code, and I will do that. I think I'll write a blog app and probably do another webinar that shows a bit of how to deal with styles and draw some colors and things like that. It's not massively difficult, but it's an in-depth subject that needs a bit of explanation with code, I think, rather than me just talking about it. Let's go to the next screen. So Our Media Dev, they also, Our Media Dev, the reason they're a good company is they're also the people that do the DelphiStyles.com website. And for DelphiStyles.com, some of those styles are the ones that you see being given away by Embarcadero. Okay, so not all of them, but some of them. And if you go to Delphi Styles website, they have a little plan there. You can work out how much it is in your own local currency. It's not really a plug for them in a commercial sense, but it is in the sense that I think their stuff is good. Again, there are other people around that are doing this kind of thing, but if you go to their site, they have styles for FireMonkey and styles for VCL at DelphiStyles.com, and they are a big or a wider variety of different styles, other than just the ones that's available by Get It from Embarcadero. And of course, the number one thing I still say you should put in every single app that you're shipping now is the Skier for Delphi controls. You really need to be using Skier for Delphi. And I have some breaking news. As of yesterday evening, Skier for Delphi version 4 has been released. There are some breaking changes in that, so I didn't include them in the demo I'm going to show today. I'm using the slightly older version of Skier for Delphi. The Skier for Delphi version 4 has come out and includes some very cool features, and actually bumps up to use a later version of Skier Skier project anyway. If you're not familiar with Skier, how have you missed my presentations on them? Have you missed Jim's presentations on them? If you saw us via an email, then there's probably a link down at the bottom of that email to the new Skier presentation anyway. Skier for Delphi adds a real oomph to your apps, and I'm going to show you an app with Skier for Delphi in a moment. Just use it. It's a no-brainer. It's completely free. It's open source. It's managed by two brothers. You go to skierfordelphi.org, and Skier is used in things like Flutter and all over the place. It adds a 2D library, the ability to show SVGs in a very easy way, the ability to do animations, custom fonts in a much easier way. It will make your FireMonkey programs quicker to render with more quality in the rendering as well. Really, it's as simple as that. Try it out for yourself. If you think I'm a liar, fine, then don't use it. It's cost you nothing. It's free. But if you haven't tried it yet, try it, and it will make a big difference to your FireMonkey VCL apps. Embarcadero are very interested in it. Jim and I are both big fans of it and champions of the project, because we just think it's a great project. And some other free resources you can add as well. You can go to the following places: svgrepo.com. Now in Windows 11 and Windows 10, more and more of the things that you can do are using icons that are far more simplified than they used to be. If you're familiar with the Font Awesome project, then Font Awesome were really the ones that kicked off the whole idea of the material design icons and stuff like that, where they're simplified save buttons, and it was really came out with Android and iOS, and has really just become the de facto standard now. Almost every app that has been written in the last probably year or something like that are using these kind of icons from Font Awesome, which is a font that has font icons in it, and so you can just display the font, and out comes an icon that will re-render at the right size. SVG Repo has got a lot of those icons in there. So if you go to svgrepo.com, there are 300,000 SVGs in there of every type you could ever imagine. I mean everything. Pick something, it's there. Lucid.dev, again, instead of just SVGs, this includes lots of icons, as in .ico files and .jpegs and .svgs, I think as well. Might even have EPS. Open source, again, and free, and there's even a tool that you can use to browse their different combinations. And working with the Skier for Delphi stuff are lottifiles.com. If you go there and just browse through, and I'll show you some of them in a moment, there will be lots and lots of animations for Skier for Delphi that you can use. And in fact, if you see my little person there doing their, what do they call it? I should know what it's called. Anyway, the little dance that you do there, I'm ashamed that I forgot what it's called. My daughter tells me it all the time. But you can see my little teddy bear doing the dance. That is a Lottie animation. And in fact, anything that moves in this presentation, unless it was a screen grab, is probably a Lottie animation. Okay, so let's have a look at some demos to put my money where my mouth is, and go from there. So first of all, let me just answer a couple of questions. Javkovsky says that the font color for text on status of a variable CL green, etc. Yes. What he's saying there is that if you use CL green, then it is a variable rather than a constant. It's not strictly correct. Again, I think the flossing dance, that's it. Tatiana says it's the flossing dance. That's what he was doing. Yes, correct. My little animation was doing the flossing dance, yeah. Yeah, again, I think we probably need to do a webinar about colors and styles and how to actually use styles in a way that means that your colors work with the style, so that if someone swaps from one color to another, it works correctly. Okay, and that was with the on-draw cell question. Yes, it was. Yeah, correct. Okay, so let's show a demo. Okay, so let's go into here. This is RAD Studio 11, and you'll like the new background there, because on the home page, as you can see that on the welcome page, you can now put an image behind there, your own custom image. And if you, like me, you're very clever, then you can make it look like your desktop is transparent and that the start page is transparent. I'll let you into a little secret. I went down to here and said edit layout, and I picked my desktop background and used it as the background for the welcome page. So it's not actually transparent, it just looks like it is, but I thought that was funny. It just made me laugh. Right, style controls. Let us go to have a look at some different examples. Right, so let's see, what have we got? Wow. Here we go. Here we go. Right, so this is using the Almeida Dev style controls. And if I hit run and I've got everything set up properly, you will see that I have got a fluid UI interface. If I pick a dark theme like this, you should now more easily see that the background is showing through. It might not be immediately obvious because on the webinar it compresses the video, and so you can't always see the colouring behind there, unfortunately. But this is the acrylic background effect. This control also allows you to things like have some wallpaper on that acrylic effect automatically. And I don't know if you can see it, probably doesn't show up very well, but if you download their example, you'll be able to see it. And it shows this background through. There's not much else in this particular demo, but you get the general gist. Windows 11 UI, if we turn that off, then it doesn't do that. The Windows 11 UI has got these little highlighted things down here. I like these controls. I think they're very good. This section here is just a simple bit of code to change the various themes at runtime, and you can see what the effects are at runtime. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So if we close that one, and then we'll open another one, which I think was yeah. Let me just close this. Oh no, we don't do that. Let's go through and pick the other one. There's one called controls, style controls. Put it one, Fluent UI. Got too many options. Okay, well, let's come back to that in a moment. Control demo. There you go. So these are also part of the Fluent UI / style controls app. I can't find the project off the top of my head because I've got too many open. But this again is just one of their demos. It's really just a graphics library, but with that graphics library, obviously you get all of the Fluent UI controls. Which control is used on the left of the navigation menu? Data report settings is a question. That is the part of the style controls set. Okay. So the question that was being asked by Akim was which control was used on the Fluent UI demo. This one for the navigation. The answer is that down here, this control here is part of the style controls. So without going into too much depth on this, this graphic is part of their control. These are buttons, and all this behavior where you can see where I move my mouse, you should hopefully be able to see that there's a highlight along the control. And you can also see just here as well that there's a little lit button, which is the standard behavior of UI3 and UWP type apps. Basically anything that's using the Fluent UI design language. That's how these work. I really do. I can't believe he sells these for such a small amount. Comparatively speaking, of the control sets that are available, this is one of the cheaper sets. I'm a big fan of TMS controls. I've said this many times. I'm a big fan of some of the other vendors as well. But our Media Dev, I think, is really in a branch of their own in terms of Fluent UI. It's very cool. And if you're talking about Windows 11 apps and you want your Delphi VCL apps to fit in, then this is the way to do it. This has got some interesting tools like this is a control where these are built in, these graphics, pulled from the Font Awesome site, which I talked about earlier on. And so you can show almost anything in here. You just change the name. There's a little coded piece of text that you put in here called bike or something like that, and it will show the bike. It's got the ability to do various bits and bobs. Very, very, very clever. Tabs and all sorts of wonderful stuff. These aren't totally, strictly speaking, Windows 11 or Windows 10, but you get the general gist of it. I like some of these things. Where's this? There's one. Oh, this one. I like this one. Look, whee! If I move my mouse around, they all move at the same time. Look at how smooth that animation is. It's all GDI type stuff. Very cool. And this does not look like your average Delphi program, I think. I think I can surface that. Right, so let's look at an average Delphi program. And I say average, I mean a very cool one that I wrote, as you do. And this is one that, if you followed along on a blog post that I did, is using Skier for Delphi. Okay, so in the background, I think if I did control, let's see, I'll go here. Yeah, Skier is enabled. And if I go into here, you'll see that there's some information about global use Skier and all the rest of it. And so the Skier for Delphi controls are active in there. And in fact, if I type Skier in here, oh, it won't work. If I go down to here and choose SK, I think. Okay. No, can't remember what it is off the top of my head. There it is. Here's the Skier controls. So what does this do? Well, I wanted to make an app that looked pretty, shall we say, for Windows 10 / Cool UI. This is not strictly speaking a Windows 10 app. It's an anything Windows app. It could be running on Windows 8.1 upwards. I believe Skier is supported on there. But it could also be cross-platform because it's a FireMonkey app. It can actually be a Mac OS app, or indeed any of the others. So it could be Android, it could be Linux, it could be Mac OS. Mac OS X ARM, because I've got an ARM Mac sitting behind me, and of course Windows 32 and Windows 64. But let's just run it, and I want to show you what it looks like, and then I'm going to improve it, believe it or not. So if I run this app, it's supposed to be a weather app. So up comes this nice animation that shows a sunrise, and then that fades away, and in fades this background, and then in slides a panel, and up slides an animation. Okay, so I'll do that one more time, just so you get the general idea of what it does. So I hit run. Yes, this will be posted on YouTube, Richard. The animation fades away along with the text, and in fades the background. The panel slides across, and we see the moving animation. Now, this is pure Delphi, just for Skier, nothing else. No extra component packs or anything like that. And it's open source, so you can download it and see what I did to make that happen. And the only really tricky part is this part here where I use a thread. I use a task to sleep, because when the animation displays, I want it to be visible for a while so you can all go, "Ooh, I can see the animation." And then once that's finished, I want the animation to fade away and the background to turn up. Can you see how many lines of code that is? It's hardly any. Okay, so how am I doing this? Well, this control here is a Skier for Delphi animation control. Okay, and if I go to the properties and where is it? Main animation. Oh, I can't remember the file name. Source. There you go. Oh, I knew it was something. So this is a Lottie file, and that's the animation. That's how the animation looks. Okay, and at the end of the animation, when it finishes playing, that's when it triggers this do next animation. The do next animation, what that does is runs that task, and that task stops the main animation from running, and then it starts the effect on the animation. Now, what's the effect on the animation? Well, the effect that I've got running on the animation, if I just go back to the properties, is at the on the opacity, I selected create new T-float animation, and I do describe this in the blog post that goes with this particular app. And the float animation, what that does is ends up with an animation here. Okay, I renamed it just so that I can know which one was which. And what that does is affects the opacity of that control, whether it's transparent or not transparent, and it does it based on when that control becomes invisible. Okay, so in the code, I say make it invisible. Okay, so I turn it off, and then I that triggers the opacity, and the opacity, it'll go from being completely non-transparent to transparent. Now, how do I get the other bit to come in? Well, similar kind of thing. My main panel, if I just make it visible for a second, is this. Okay, and it's just a T rectangle. And on the T rectangle are some controls. There's some label controls, and these are SVG controls, shall we say, from Skier for Delphi. But it could be, you could put any image you like in there. I just chose to do SVG so they scale properly. And just exactly the same, there is an animation on it. So the animation panel effect, I did exactly the same thing. I said on the position, create a new animation. I dropped it on from the palette, and I said, manipulate this property name, start with it being in -1000. In other words, it's off the screen. Okay. And by the time the animation is finished, which takes 1 second, it will be at position 35. So it will be here on the screen. So it starts by having it off the screen, and it then animates it onto the screen. So you see that pleasing effect where it slides in. Nothing here uses anything other than Delphi to do it. And the same with the other controls as well. And there is a blog post that explains how to do this. How do we, in the presentation is on 1920 resolution on a 24-inch monitor. Yes, that is correct. I am using a small monitor. And the reason is that if I do it with, and they're saying with a 100% scaling, yes. If I do it, GoToWebinar has some quirks, which is what we're broadcasting with. And if I do it on anything other than that resolution, horrible things happen to GoToWebinar. So we've discovered I made that my main desktop and then do it in there. Now, the thing I wanted to show you just very quickly, if I just go in here and do it, is there's something wrong with this app. And what is it that's wrong with this app? Okay. Well, first of all, the thread, that's why that app still works, even though the animation is doing things. See that? Still responsive. No, not responding, and that's because I used that thread. Okay. But look at the title bar. It's red. That's not cool. And the reason it's red is that my Windows, I forget what they call it. Let me pull it over. My Windows accent color, that's the word I'm looking for, is red. Okay, so by default, if I don't have any theme going, it will show all my title bars and my borders around things in that color, red color, like that. Okay, well, that's not very cool. Let's make it prettier. So what we're going to do, we will just go into here and say Starbook, drop a Starbook on the app, double click, I'm going to open it up, and do you remember Nero that we talked about earlier on, meaning black in Italian? I'm going to pick that up, close it. Yes, I want to apply that styling to the app. Okay, I'm going to select the form, and down here you see this entry that says Starbook 1. Now when I run it, the title bar is now themed. The rest of the app still works the way it did before because I've not applied any theming to the controls because I don't want to. But if I wanted to, I could have made this text to the theme color, which would be white. And if I applied a light theme, then this would be white or blue or something like that. That's it. That's as easy as it gets in terms of styling your app. You can't get much easier than that. It really is. Okay. So those are those demos for that. This app, as I said before, is on the web. I'll be giving you links at the end so you can see where it is, and so you can have a play around with it yourself. There is, just in case you're wondering and thinking, oh, I bet you it's just a Windows app. No, it's not. I also did it for iOS. I have an iPhone SE and a Mac which is running ARM. It's a Mac Mini ARM M1, I think, and I can compile this and run this on my Mac as well. So, you know, Windows 11, iOS, all from the same piece of Delphi project, same Delphi project, same Delphi code. That's one of the main significant advantages of Delphi, is being able to go cross-platform like that. Dead simple. Okay, so let's go back, and I think that was all the demos I was going to show for now. Yeah, probably. Okay, so let's go through and look at some other bits. Right, so some other resources. You notice that I picked a dark theme when I just themed the app then. But what about if I want it to be light or dark mode, or optionally light or dark mode? Well, there is a unit that I've written. Marco Cantu has got a different version. He uses a form helper. I use a piece of procedural code to do this. But in order to detect Windows 11 dark mode, you can use this unit. It's open source and free to use. And, you know, I don't care what you use it in, commercial or otherwise, go ahead. Download it from my repository, and you will be able to detect dark mode and then pick a style, light or dark, depending on whether Windows is running in dark mode or light mode. Very important for Windows 11. If your apps don't support Windows dark mode and light mode, they'll think your apps are broken, honestly. And I talk more about this, and I also talk about adding rounded corners, which we haven't talked about today, where you can add rounded corners to the apps so that they also fit in, because some of the tool windows and things like that have rounded corners, but you can also turn that off. And there's a blog post on there that talks about that. But all the stuff that you could possibly want, I've written about, and I will keep writing about. There will be, as I said before, a post coming up that will include all of these links, and the links in this webinar are actually at the address there that you see on the screen. If you go to my Check Digits GitHub account and look up my gists, it should be on my page, my user page anyway. Click on there, and all of the links that I've shown today are in there. Also links to blog posts and things like that as well. Okay, so let's just go through some of the questions, because we've got about 8 minutes left. I did say I wasn't sure how long it would take. It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but you know, as you do, you've got to do these things. So let's see what questions we've got. Will this webinar be posted on YouTube? I've said yes. Yes, it will be. It will be also on the main blog at blogs.embarcadero.com. Where you can always find me hanging out. And also follow me on Twitter and follow Embarcadero Tech on Twitter as well, and we'll publish it on Twitter and let you know. I normally repost Embarcadero stuff, but they repost me as well. So go on to Twitter and we'll let you know when it's ready. Can you give us all the links? Yes, I can. If you go to that address that you see on the screen, guest, how do I say that? Hold on. Let me just, I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna, no, I'm not. The one that you see on the screen at the moment, that's the link for it, okay? I don't know what else to say. Let's see. gist.github.com/check digits. All the links are there on that site. Hello, what about the real dark mode of Windows without using styles? There are already some apps which support this. Okay, so if you use native controls, if you set your controls to native, this will work, but not all of them. So the questioner is asking, who is it? Akim, again, asking what happens if the real dark mode is being used in Windows. Won't your app automatically shows things dark? No, it won't. And it depends as well. If you've got third-party libraries, some of them will not work full stop, and you'll have to tweak things manually. But actually, things like text boxes, edit boxes and stuff like that, will come up in dark mode. It just depends on what controls you're using. Try it and see for yourself. It's not difficult to swap from dark mode to light mode. Try it and see what happens. Use the styles. That would be my advice, because not only do you get a dark mode, you also get a really good looking dark mode. If you don't use styles, you will get the default Windows rendering on the caption that I said at the top. There are many Ian Barkers on Twitter. Yeah, there may be many Ian Barkers, but let me just put me up on here. Who you should be going to.com was asked. Punctuation. I think that is the correct link. That's the only one, me. You'll see me as check digits, but if not, just go to about.me and follow me on Twitter and say hi. And if you email me at ian.barker@gmail.com, as I'm very, very busy, I am a working programmer. I was literally, 20 minutes before we start preparing for this presentation today, I was literally working on cloud servers and in some meetings with some fairly important people. I work for a living as a developer. I'm not a professional presenter in the sense that that's all I do. I do actually write code every day. I get up at 6 a.m. every day, and I start banging out code at 7 a.m. every day. That's literally what I do. That's what I've done for 30 odd years of my life. I am a professional developer. I love it. I remember the first day I wanted to be a programmer. I never ever regret becoming a coder. It's the best job in the world ever. Bar none. Is the code available for the form style change embedded in the form header code available? Yes, that is on the repo. Just go to my GitHub page as check digits. Just search them as user check digits, and it's up there. Looks nice, says Marek. Thank you. Which options are available for the ribbon interfaces? The ribbon interface is a little bit weird. Okay, the ribbon interface, there is a set components in the VCL, I think, that support ribbon interfaces, and I know that TMS have a version as well, and the style controls have a version as well. One thing you should know about the ribbon interface that you see in Microsoft Office or something like that is that there is a license involved with that. I think Microsoft changed their mind about it, but if you wanted to adopt the ribbon interface in the old days, Microsoft would actually ask you to submit some license for it. I don't know if that's still the case, because I don't use ribbon myself. The ribbon interface is gradually becoming less popular, shall we say. So it's up to you. You know, take a look. But there are some. You might have to turn the package on in RAD Studio, I think, deliberately, because I think they don't ship it. Great presentation. Thank you. I think that's most of the questions. What time is it? We've got 2 minutes left. Otherwise, Martha will probably have a little break then. Let's have a look. Yeah, most of the others are, will it be posted? Yes, it will. And thank you for this webinar. Great webinar, lots of information. Thanks. Look, you know, thanks for everybody saying thanks. And I really appreciate it. I am a developer first and foremost. I write code, and the people I hang out with are developers. Jim McKeith is a good friend of mine. Obviously, him and I present on a lot of webinars together. I have the ability to talk a lot, as you're all aware. But I do this because I really, really believe that Delphi is one of the best languages you can use as an application developer out there. If you want to write mobile apps, it's a no-brainer, really. It's so much easier than using most of the other options. You know, like Swift and things like that. That's a vertical market. Use Delphi. Go with Delphi. This is the way to do it. I don't get paid any extra or anything like that for saying that. I mean it. You know, I think everybody should be using RAD Studio and Delphi. I think any other option is doing it the hard way. You know, I really do. So that's why I do these webinars, and I'm glad people like them. Thanks very much for your thanks. That's where we're at. Okay, so I don't think we have any more questions. So we're at the top of the hour. Email me by all means. I won't always get back to you immediately because I am busy working and trying to earn a living. Follow me on Twitter and go to my webpage and things like that. And the main blog will have a replay link and the slides and everything as well. Probably tomorrow at this rate, but the link that you see there, tinyurl.com/Delphi W11 design. That's where that will take you to the blog, but just look out for the main blog. Okay, and I think that is probably it. Thanks a lot, everybody, and see you next time. I'm not quite sure when I'm on it next, but we shall find out. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.